We're here today with Louis Patler, New York Times award-winning author, one of the 20 great thought leaders in innovation in the country today, and the president of the BIT Group. Louis, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Jeff. Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about what you're working on and what you've been up to the last few years.
Well, it's been now 25 years for the BIT Group. The BI and the T stands for Business, Innovation, and Trends. And we've been both a research group as well as training programs and a lot of work in consulting.
Got it. And focused around this whole idea of innovation culture?
One way or another, leadership, strategy, and innovation are kind of the three-legged stool of what we do and the integration of those three elements.
And I understand that you were actually on the sort of reading list for Steve Jobs. You were one of the people he recommended that people ought to read.
I was, much to my surprise. It's flattering. But he had a list, apparently a very long list, of books that were on his must-read for new Apple employees. I understand that Steve Wozniak's list was about a page long.
Right,
and
wow.
Had 8 or 10 titles, all of which were pretty technical. So, yes, I was pleased to be acknowledged in that way.
That's great. So innovation is, it seems like in some ways it's sort of an overused word and whatnot. It gets used an awful lot. And I know you've studied it. There's a lot of empirical evidence around innovation cultures and innovation. As you put that into the context of a supplier, a consumer packaged goods company, what sort of things do they need to be thinking about in trying to build, maintain, or reinvigorate an innovation culture?
Well, first of all, yes, innovation is widely misunderstood, and as a term carries a lot of baggage. I would say, and prefer to say that innovation should be understood by all suppliers as having a lowercase I and not a capital I.
Right.
It's everybody's everyday job, and if you used the word innovation interchangeably with words like problem solving, you'd be closer to the mark of what our research has shown about the nature and substance of innovation. It's really about everybody in the workforce, a whole diagonal slice of a company, especially for suppliers, manufacturers, having a stake in and some of the resources to themselves be involved in innovation on a daily basis.
So as you think about culture, I think it was Drucker that says that culture eats strategy for breakfast, or at least he's attributed to saying that. And so part of this is a culture, and a lot of that falls on the leadership. What advice do you have for the leaders in driving this innovation play or this problem-solving play into what they're doing?
Well, I think the key is innovators being understood as separate from innovation.
Right.
It's the members of the workforce, all of them being brought into making a contribution to the general good of resolving problems, meeting customers' needs, satisfying your major customers in this instance, as well as then, in terms of what you eat for lunch.
Right.
I think innovators will eat those other elements for lunch. If you don't have innovation as part of the fiber of all your employees, and I'm not talking about a culture of innovation.
Right.
That's an abstraction.
Right.
I'm talking about a company of innovators. That's what our data has clearly shown. It's all about individual people making a contribution that ends up being called innovative, but it's really part of what you do.
One of the things that I often look on when I think about innovation, and I think about some of the things that have been done, is Kelly Johnson, who was at Lockheed, was credited with pulling together a team of innovators and creators, and they did the SR-71 and the U-2, and they did the stealth aircraft, but they were pulled out of sort of the corporate structure and bureaucracy. I think, I sense from some of your writing that you see a danger in doing that. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, it's the so-called skunk works, where you separate out the chosen few, the elites, the creatives, from the rest of the peons in the organization. I think if you look longitudinally, you look in the long haul, what you see are some of those places and entities like Bell Labs and Monsanto's R&D and other things that were following that skunkworks model a few years back. They run their course and then they dissipate and then they go away.
Right.
So nowadays, what the clients are usually wanting is sustainability, not only on the level of of what do you do with your waste and water consumption and energy,
Right,
what's
right.
your carbon footprint, but also what's your ability to deliver not just the immediate product, but the product behind that product.
Sure.
How do you do it over and over again? And I believe in use the term embedding innovation into an organization rather than separating it out.
And it's probably pretty clear that that's a necessity, given how short product life cycles are and just the global competition, that it's not really an alternative. This is not an optional thing for most companies that want to be successful.
You would think so,
Right.
but our data shows a great resistance to that. And or when, say, there's a change of leadership and they get this bee in their bonnet that it's important to innovate. And I think McKinsey recently did an article that from their research, 85% of companies now have innovation in either their logo or their corporate values and so on. But then what does that mean?
Right.
Well, how does that translate? How does that manifest itself?
Sure.
So we don't see enough of that assumption being made that you just articulated. It's usually either delegated to, well, kind of figure out how we're going to do more innovation, or it's isolated
Right.
in the context you were just talking about of a Skunk Works type of unit.
Got it. So we're just about out of time for this segment, but you made some really interesting discussion about how the surfer analogy and catching the big wave has something to do with it. Would you mind coming back and talking about that in a future segment?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to.
That'd be great. So the remainder of Saturday Morning Meeting will be coming right up.